Welcome to Grieflet Tales, where quiet moments become powerful stories. Today's story follows a girl in a wheelchair, a struggling father, and a single dad whose kindness changes everything.
Snow pressed softly against the tall glass walls of Rose Hill Academy, drifting in slow spirals that looked almost deliberate, as if the winter sky was trying to hush the world into tenderness. Inside the auditorium, warm lights blurred into golden halos above the small crowd of parents and teachers gathering for the dress rehearsal of the school's winter showcase. But just outside the glow, tucked near the far left aisle beside a pillar, sat Elara Winslow, her slim hands resting on the arms of her wheelchair like fragile birds afraid to move. Her breath fogged the air in faint puffs each time she sighed. And though the heater hummed somewhere above, she seemed untouched by warmth. Her father, Callum Winslow, stood behind her with the rigid stillness of a man who had learned to carry his grief in silence. His charcoal suit sat perfectly on his frame, but his expression had the frayed edges of someone who seldom slept. The CEO of one of the city's most powerful tech empires, yet completely powerless here, watching his daughter watch life from behind a glass wall she couldn't break. Every time a child laughed or spun across the polished stage, Elara's eyes drifted downward, as if bracing for an ache she knew too well. The music instructor clapped her hands, summoning the kids to their places. Children rushed into position, shoes tapping, skirts fanning like soft snowflakes. The soft piano melody began, rising like a breath before a confession. Lyra's eyes glimmered, reflecting the stage lights. Her legs, still and slender beneath a wool blanket, remained unmoved, but her fingers twitched slightly in her lap as if her body still remembered before her mind allowed her to. Callum leaned down, voice low, nearly lost in the music. "We can leave if this is too much." Elara shook her head without looking at him. "I just want to see them dance." Though the words were steady, they carried a tremble at the edges, like frost cracking gently against glass. Callum swallowed hard. His hand hovered near her shoulder, but didn't land. He'd learned touch could sometimes make wounds ache deeper. The auditorium doors opened behind them, letting in a gust of cold. Around with it walked Rowan Hale, coat dusted with snow, hair wind-tousled, and eyes soft with quiet watchfulness. Beside him trotted his son Finn, holding a crumpled paper bag in one hand, and wearing mismatched gloves that gave him the appearance of someone too busy being kind to remember matching colors. The father and son didn't belong to this polished world of designer coats and curated smiles, but they moved with a gentle sincerity that drew glances rather than dismissal. Finn tugged Rowan's sleeve and pointed toward the stage, excitement flickering in his grin. Rowan smiled back, one of those small, warm smiles that made even strangers feel steadier. Callum noticed them, but only vaguely, his focus sinking back to his daughter. Lara's gaze had drifted to her lap again, watching her unmoving legs. The lights dimmed slightly, the music growing fuller, sweeter, almost aching. Children spun in perfect arcs. Rowan, guiding Finn down the aisle, noticed the girl in the wheelchair first. Noticed the way she tried to soften her breathing, the way her shoulders tensed every time the dancers leaped. It was the kind of quiet pain that didn't shout but whispered, and Rowan had learned to hear whispers. Finn noticed too, but unlike his father, he didn't pause, he changed direction. "Finn," Rowan whispered, surprised as the boy walked toward Elara. Callum straightened, alarm flickering across his face, but Finn simply stopped in front of Elara and held out the crumpled paper bag. "These are for you," he said, with the unfiltered sincerity that only children manage. "I made them so no one feels left out at the show." Elara blinked, startled. She opened the bag with careful fingers and found small handmade paper snowflakes, some crooked, some torn at the edges, all crafted with earnest effort. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Finn grinned. "You can have the best one. My dad says the best thing you make should go to the person who needs it most." Rowan finally reached them, cheeks slightly flushed from embarrassment. Finn maybe, give her space, buddy. But Callum shook his head slowly. It's all right. Elara traced the edges of the snowflake, her fingers trembling not from cold, but from being noticed gently, unexpectedly. Finn plopped onto the empty chair beside her, kicking his legs as the dancers finished the first number. Do you like dancing? He asked. Elara's jaw flickered with hesitation. I used to. Finn nodded with a simple acceptance that didn't demand explanations. You still can. Dance isn't just legs. Callum inhaled sharply, but Rowan placed a quieting hand on his forearm, steady, grounding, not intrusive. Let him talk, Rowan murmured softly. Elara looked up. What do you mean? Finn lifted both hands and made a swirling motion in the air, mimicking the dancer's movements but with his fingers. Hands danced too. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, Elara smiled a tiny, fragile crescent that glowed like the first spark in a long, dark hearth. But that smile triggered something tender and dangerous inside Callum. Hope, and hope was cruel when lost too many times. His breath tightened. Rowan saw it. Sometimes, he said gently, kids see possibilities long before adults do. Callum's jaw tensed. Possibility can be painful. Only when we look for the ending, Rowan replied. Kids look at the moment. Elara lifted her hands again, mimicking Finn's little swirling gesture, only barely at first, then with more intention. The air stirred softly around her fingers. The music instructor noticed. She paused the rehearsal for a brief second, watching the small exchange from across the room. Her expression softened. Finn laughed softly. See, you're great. Elara shook her head with shy disbelief, but her cheeks flushed. Callum stared at her hands, moving, expressive, free, and realization hit him like a slow, warm sunrise. She wasn't broken. She was trying, always trying. But just as warmth rose between them, a dancer on stage executed a spinning jump, landing hard. The sudden thud echoed through the auditorium. Elara flinched violently. Her hands dropped. Her breath hitched. Something in her expression closed like a door slamming shut. Callum crouched, panic tightening his voice. Elara, sweetheart, it's all right. She shook her head urgently, eyes glassing. Everyone's watching. No, no one is. Yes, they are, she whispered, voice trembling. I don't belong here. Rowan knelt on the other side, not crowding her, his voice steady as a winter lake. Elara, you belong because you're here, because you want to be. That's enough. Elara blinked, torn between belief and fear. Finn reached out hesitantly, placing one gloved hand over hers. I'll stay by you. The lights above flickered faintly. Then steadied, almost symbolic, like the room itself was breathing with them. Callum watched the three of them, Rowan, calm and grounded. Finn, brave and unfiltered. Elara, shaking but fighting to stay open, and something unfamiliar cracked inside him. Not grief, not fear, a shift. A tiny beginning. The instructor clapped again and called for a short break, but her eyes rested on Elara with a new softness, as if seeing not a child confined, but a child rising. Callum leaned closer, voice barely a whisper. Elara, do you want to try something? Anything at all? You don't have to, but you can. Elara hesitated, breath trembling, eyes wet. Then she lifted her hands just slightly, just enough, and whispered, Show me again, Finn. The boy grinned, nodding eagerly. Rowan stood slowly, watching Callum watch his daughter, and murmured, This might be the start of something she remembers for the rest of her life. Callum's throat tightened. Or something that scares her. Rowan shook his head gently. She's already stayed. That tells you what she wants. Elara practiced a tiny upward motion of her hands, mirroring Finn. A soft glow from the stage lights caught on her fingers, turning them gold. Callum's breath hitched with awe. And just as the music instructor restarted the piano melody, Rowan looked at Callum with a quiet certainty and said, Maybe she doesn't just need a place to belong. Maybe she needs someone to dance beside her. Callum turned toward Himheart, thundering with a sudden, startling question. "Are you offering that for her?" he whispered. Rowan held his gaze. "No," he said softly. "I think my son already has." And in that moment between the flicker of stage lights, the soft rise of piano notes, and Elara's trembling hands reaching against Callum, realized the world had just shifted, ever so slightly, but unmistakably, toward something new, something warm, something terrifying, and something beautiful. Snow fell in slow, deliberate strokes outside the academy windows the next morning, turning the world into something soft and almost forgiving. Callum wheeled Elara through the quiet hallway, her hands folded in her lap, fingers still tingling from yesterday's fragile courage. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't shrinking either. There was a steadiness to her gaze Callum hadn't seen in months, as though a tiny spark had survived the night without being extinguished. Rowan and Finn were already waiting in the rehearsal room. Finn knelt on the floor, cutting paper in little half-circles, creating more imperfect snowflakes. Rowan leaned against the wall, sipping a paper cup of coffee that steamed in the cold light. When Elara entered, Finn lit up like a lantern. "You came back," he braved, as if he hadn't fully believed it until now. Elara nodded, shy but determined. "I want to practice. Just the hand part." "If that's okay." Finn scrambled up, scattering paper fragments around him. "It's more than okay." He took her left hand, gently hesitant. Reverend hand moved it in a slow arc. She followed, tracing the air with her fingers. There was grace in her motion, even if her arm trembled. Callum felt his chest tighten with a fierce, unexpected hope. Rowan watched from a quiet distance, arms crossed, expression soft. "She's learning fast," he murmured to Callum. Callum glanced at him, bewildered by how easily Rowan fit into this fragile space. "She hasn't tried anything like this in months." "Sometimes children hide their bravery until someone gives them permission," Rowan said. Yesterday, she found her permission. The rehearsal began around them. Children danced in rhythmic patterns, the music rising in warm waves. Elara lifted her hands again, following Finn's movements with increasing intent. A teacher paused mid-instruction, watching her with a soft astonishment. But Elara didn't notice she was too focused, too alive in the moment. Then a dancer slipped on the polished floor, falling with a loud thud. The sound cracked through Elara like lightning. Her hands jolted, her breath stuttered, her eyes widened in fear. Callum stepped forward, heart pounding. "Sweetheart." But Rowan reached her first, kneeling by her side with the calm of a quiet harbor. "Hey," he murmured, tone low and grounding. "Look at me." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "That sound wasn't about you. It was just a fall. Part of learning, just like this moment." Elara swallowed, chest rising unevenly. Finn squeezed her hand. "I'm right here. But don't stop." Callum watched his daughter steady herself, nod through strength, but through trust. When her breath finally leveled, she nodded at Finn to continue, and she lifted her hands again. The recital arrived quietly. Chairs filled with parents wrapped in scarves and coats, murmuring in anticipation. The stage glowed with warm amber lights. Callum wheeled Elara to the side of the stage where she would join Finn for the special duet the instructor had added last-minute hand dance woven into the main performance. Callum knelt beside her, smoothing her hair. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. Elara's lips trembled, but she shook her head. "I want to. Finn needs a partner. Not, I'm ready. Not, I'm brave. Just a simple truth. She wanted to belong." The music began. Children stepped into their choreography, spinning and sweeping the stage with practiced confidence. Then Finn walked forward, turning to face Elara, who raised her trembling hands. The audience fell utterly silent as the two of them created a dance unlike anything in the program, movements of fingers and wrists, gestures filled with story, shaped by courage. Finn spun lightly, then returned to her, matching the arc of her hands with his own. Elara's cheeks glowed, eyes bright, breath steady. She wasn't imitating the dancers. She was dancing. Callum felt tears warming his eyes. Rowan stood beside him, hands clasped, awe softening his features. When the music swelled to its final chord, Finn extended his hand toward Elara. She lifted hers to meet his, fingertips touching like the closing of a fragile but unbreakable promise. The room erupted in applause, not loud, not wild, but warm, grateful, moved. Callum knelt again, voice breaking. "Kayla, you were extraordinary." Elara smiled through tears. "Finn made me brave." Rowan stepped closer. "No, Finn reminded you of something you already had." As the crowd began to disperse, Finn tugged on Rowan's sleeve. "Can Elara come over tomorrow? Elara, want to teach her star hands?" Elara looked at her father anxiously, as though fearing the moment would collapse. Callum exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Tomorrow, and the day after." Rowan smiled, quiet, warm, and certain. "Looks like this is only the beginning." Snow drifted past the windows in soft spirals again, but this time the cold felt different. Less like a barrier, more like a backdrop. Elara reached for her father's hand, then turned and reached for Finn's too. And for the first time in a long time, Callum didn't feel like he was guiding his daughter through a broken world. He felt like he was watching her step bravely, beautifully into a new one. If this story warmed your heart, stay with us for more moments like this. Stories that remind us love can still find its way home.